one other area of importance. Of course, we're discussing beyond instrumentation and data acquisition. Despite the fact that the office of the Vice President is actively involved, I think as a country, we need to enhance awareness meetings in order to adequately impart the knowledge to the end user. And in addition, some politicians are not aware of the importance of some of the equipment we install in some of the stations. So it would be quite imperative to make them aware that we are installing this equipment for the sake of the common man and woman in the village, so that by so doing, they will support us and as well as support the communities. Secondly, I would want to comment on the issue of stations that are inter-district. You may have some catchments that are quite big, and one station may not suffice to warn people adequately. So maybe the request is funds permitting and time permitting, can we also open a station or two within the same catchment, so that as we want people downstream, we may have adequate time to make sure there's adequate communication to all people concerned. The other issue also is the border stations. I want to share with you a project we had between Tanzania and Malawi. We did a study in flood preparedness, and we have a document along that study in which we determined the levels at which the Songwe would flood, especially in the lower basin. And after this was developed, we sensitized people from the two districts, from the two countries, especially in the lower basin. And when signs are there that the flooding may come, people are made aware to make sure they take care of their property, as well as move to upland where necessary. So either country may go to the stations to check the data or even collect the data at any time, because we have established quite very good relations. So within the same JEF project, I think that can be established as well, because disasters or flooding has no boundary. I think at the moment, that's my comment.
Fairly invisible to me for the first day or two, but I found one at breakfast today with Georgie George. He pointed out to me that there's a company called Weather Zone, an international company, that produces accurate forecasts over 48 hours in particular, that are better than the South African Met services. And they're selling this information in highly sophisticated packaging to the mining sector. I think they're looking at the construction sector, energy sector. They are doing what we are talking about, and extremely successfully, from what I understand. So for me, that's a big trumpeting elephant. In terms of figuring out how to compete with them, they're doing it. And I don't know whether they're getting into early warning systems or not, but you know, you can envisage them being able to do that. They're using satellite data and information from automatic weather stations that is being uploaded onto the internet. So coming back to maintenance and sustainability, I think it's essential for the Met agencies to be thinking long and hard about what your competitive advantage is. We discussed, is it the neutral broker? Is it that the laws of your country can ensure that users use your data? I think those are not necessarily strong competitive advantages. There are going to be ways around it. So for me, I'm just putting this out as a hypothesis. Your strongest competitive advantage is maintaining your equipment on the ground and extending it, expanding it, such that you can sell that data to the likes of WeatherZone and go into a partnership with them. That is going to be where your competitive advantage lies in terms of building sustainability and accessing the private sector. I put that forward as a hypothesis that Georgie and I developed over breakfast. Thanks very much.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So at one stage, the South African Weather Service was using legislation as a way to try and block private companies from getting in and doing the work that they're doing. But that creates an anti-competitive behavior in the market, and it wasn't sustainable, and it was easy for companies to come in and do it. The details behind it are a little bit more complicated, but that's essentially what's happened. And one of the models the South African Weather Service has used is just being a provider of data and through good equipment. So they would just find a commercial company that has a specialist knowledge in a specific sector and give them the information and say, okay, you go commercialize it and then give us a license, give us a share of that data. So that's another thing that worked. But again, the contracting models needs to be very clearly defined, otherwise the Met Service will end up paying more than it should and not recovering as much as possible.
I'll react to a couple of comments that we've had regarding emergency warnings. I think it's wrong to think of the emergency warning process as just as the event is occurring. For those of you who have SMS messaging capabilities to go out to customers, in users, I would suggest that you have to send something almost every day. And on those days when there is not hazardous weather, those are the days when you are sending messages that are educational. We use a lot of short slogans in the United States because we've found that individuals do not remember detailed messages. But for example, one of the problems we have in the western United States where we have not built a lot, it's a very dry area, so there's a tendency not to build a lot of culverts under roads. And when it does rain, the water flows over the roads. And the message that we have drilled into people through TV, through radio, through print media, and through the equivalent of the SMS messages, the social media, is turn around, don't drown. That's the whole message. And people remember it. And we have those for things like use of boats, which would be equivalent for the fishing, for lightning and severe thunderstorms. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but there are people who spend a lot of time working up these 5-6 word messages that do stick in people's head and help you get the proper response. So you're doing those education using the same communications tools, but in the times when you're not really having severe weather.
Thank you.
Yes, I've got 2 remarks. First of all, the point raised, well, the discussion about the Malawi project together with Zambia. I think that's an excellent example, and I think we shouldn't forget this is a regional program. So there are a lot of synergies to be had to cooperate with neighboring countries. For example, we've discussed the lightning detection systems in Malawi and Zambia. This is an example of where it definitely makes sense to work together, because the lightning detection system, if you install all the sensors on a north-south line, then the triangulation won't work very well. So here it makes a lot of sense, and people can save money by cooperating. Similarly to a catchment that traverses the boundary. So great example of a cross-boundary cooperation on a system. The second thing, what was raised by Zambia, distinction between seasonal hazards and the rapid onset hazards. A technical point there, I think, well, hydrology has been neglected, and I think, Greg, 2016 will be the year of communication and hydrology. And I think, and the private sector. Okay, so seasonal hazards and rapid onset hazards. Amongst the hydrology part, I think most people are looking at surface water, and not many people are discussing groundwater levels. And for the seasonal hazards, the groundwater levels are very important to monitor and to keep into your hydrological modeling, because that's going to say how severe a drought. I mean, a drought is, of course, no rain. But if you have no rain and the groundwater levels are very high, then nobody's going to be too worried, because the wells will be full and people will be able to irrigate, etc. But if the groundwater levels are very low, then it's a severe problem. So that's something that will be included as part of the hydrology LTA. It will be groundwater and surface water monitoring, so that you can get the early warning capacity both for the flood, the very popular early warning systems, the one with a high impact and high visibility, but also for the slow onset, the seasonal hazards, by including the groundwater table.
Yeah, we told him. Enough. No. Yeah. For me, since I hate the words transformative change, the 2016 should be the year of innovation, because, of course, I have a lot of notes here, and we will follow up very diligently. But two things that popped on my head were, of course, operation and maintenance. We talked about it since the day one of this project. Somebody also mentioned software packaging the data for communication purposes. For me, if you think of the innovative solutions, when we came here in Addis 1 year ago, and we asked 10 different companies to bring you innovative technologies, those technologies, let's face it, need less maintenance, are easier to maintain, cost less, and some offer services together with software and packaging. So once you move out from the hardware and look at the services that the hardware provides and the commitment to operation and maintenance, you will see that effectively an innovative approach will instantly reduce these problems that have been hunting the Met offices for decades. So I can't help, talking about innovation. But again, this was just the beginning. You will think through it. I will ask you please to put this request in writing, so that we can really extrapolate what can be translated into the, a training and the physical reality, which are the people, which are the institutions, which are the companies, which are the entities you want to talk to and learn from, so that these ideas will turn into a training. A training workshop. We will translate this idea for the workshop in Zambia, and move on, of course, on all our program with the experts deployed in your countries, etc. Oh, there was also a request for digitization, I think, in Zambia, in the Gambia, that came a little later. We do have actually a parallel initiative on digitization, and we help the countries who ask for it. So among the 11, those who said, yes, I'm interested. And Mark is a little bit the coordinator of that initiative, together with our colleague, Excellent, and maybe you can have an ad hoc conversation with him.
Thank you. So I've been asked to speak on covering the last mile. I changed the title somewhat to Challenges, Opportunities and Successes in Crossing the Last Mile, Delivering Climate Services in Africa. Just to state up front that this presentation builds on the research that my team and I in Cape Town have been doing over the past couple of months for the market study. And as you'll see from my presentation, this cliche, covering the last mile, is an extremely complex field. So I want to highlight that complexity up front. because if you think that this presentation is going to be giving you the solution on how to cover the last mile, please put that assumption aside. I'm going to be giving you ideas as to how you might consider covering the last mile in your country, as opposed to giving you a recipe on how to do it. So the overview of the presentation is that 4 simple headings: intricacies and complexity of the last mile, ideas on how to weave your way across the last mile through that complexity, learning from other sectors such as retail, health, and climate change adaptation, and concluding remarks. So jumping into the intricacies and complexity of the last mile, I thought I'd just show you this conceptual framework, which I presented 2 days ago. I won't repeat the various parts of the framework that we're using in our market study, other than to say the last mile is arguably these 2 arrows. How will the Met Service get information to various private sector consumers? And please note that it's a diverse range of users, as John pointed out earlier today, from rural farmers to air flight controllers. The air flight controllers are not part of the last mile, technically speaking, but we need to consider that we're talking about communication of your information to a wide range of users. We would usually be thinking about the farmers, businesses, entrepreneurs, and pastoralists in deep rural areas. So, breaking up those red arrows a bit, we have a range of institutions involved along the distribution of this information. The Met Services, agricultural and other research agencies. You have various organizations playing a role in the communication, such as the media sector, agricultural extension, NGOs, private sector organizations. National level users, again, a wide range of people. I'm highlighting the complexity here in this, along this red arrow, all the way to your farmers and pastoralists when it becomes individual users invariably. So every now and again I'll flash up a slide to get people's attention. When we're thinking about those end users, it looks very bland on a PowerPoint presentation. Just to try and strike home the reality of this, the importance of getting to the last mile. If we just take a moment to consider that 95% of Africa's farmers rely on rain-fed agriculture, and that rain is becoming increasingly erratic as a result of climate change. It certainly pause for thought when considering the importance of finding a way to get across that last mile. So what does the climate services value chain look like? Again, this is a slide from my presentation 2 days ago, just to remind you that this is a simple breakdown of that value chain, where the data is being produced, transformed into appropriate information, which in turn needs to be packaged appropriately into products that are saleable. And there's this private sector term, fulfillment, at the end, which is concluding the sale. So questions one needs to ask down that pathway are, do you, the Met Services, have the quantity and quality of data available for distribution? Is there capacity in this chain to process the data appropriately? What is the capacity of the users like to respond appropriately? And importantly, do users trust this information sufficiently such that they will go through the closing of the deal and purchase it, or act on it? So another item worthy of contemplation, and highlighting the complexity of various aspects of this chain. When you are producing a product in the agro-met realm, you are invariably going to need a multidisciplinary team. This is a quote out of one of the articles I read on covering the last mile. It was a case study on an Indian project, and the quote is, a team of agronomists, soil scientists, plant pathologists, and entomologists were required in order to produce a product, probably just a couple of words, as John pointed out. Often these few words are the message that you have to relay via SMS. But behind those few words is that team. Quite a formidable team. And that's after you've generated the appropriate weather information or forecasting information. So, continuing on the intricacies and complexity, what channels are there for covering the last mile? We found that the readings that we've done, the projects tend to differentiate between traditional and non-traditional channels, where the traditional is TV, radio, print, retail, perhaps messages in supermarkets, for example, face-to-face discussions, church groups with extension workers, fellow farmers, etc. Non-traditional is the new digital era, mobile phones, SMS, voice messages, social media. Now, when it comes to thinking about each one of those forms, there's deeper complexity below it. You can just drill deeper and deeper into each one of those potential channels, and one needs to if you're going to be opting for using that particular channel. So when it comes to mobile phones, it may, on face value, look like a solution. Large percentage of the population have cell phones. The coverage is fairly extensive. However, if you drill deeper, you'll find that coverage in many rural areas is not appropriate for getting messages to cover the last mile. That only 58% of people in Africa own cell phones. Depends on how you look at that. 58% you can see is really high, but if you're trying to reach 100% of your population, it's not particularly high. And only 12% have access to smartphones. You invariably will need to translate your SMSs and voice messages. There's the issue of literacy, only 60% across Africa that you're going to need to tackle. And are they affordable to the people in the rural areas? Various projects have found that the cost of the phone as well as the data is a constraint in terms of them receiving messages. So this slide shows the various themes that have emerged for our team back in Cape Town. If you're considering how should I cover the last mile, I would suggest that these 7 boxes are very worthy of deep thought and analysis. Firstly, you really need to study the local context of where that last mile message is going to be received. The cultural norms, women's versus men's preferences, as we've already discussed. Intensive engagement with the users on a regular basis is required to assess whether they are acting on that message and whether it's in the appropriate form. And that can change through time. And like Coca-Cola, you're going to be needing to iterate and change your methodology frequently. I'll come back to that point. You need to be looking for virtuous cycles where people perceive the product to be valuable, they trust the product, and it's easy to access. These are themes emerging from successful projects, which I'll go through shortly. Invariably, you're going to need to piggyback on existing networks and infrastructure. For example, cell phone networks or Coca-Cola's distribution channels, which I'll talk to later. These last mile projects invariably use public funds at the outset, and the jury is still out whether the last mile is likely to be something that the private sector can do alone. There's one example I have of that. But by and large, it's public funds from CSI, corporate social responsibility investment, or donor funding. And then bundling your weather information with other services is a common theme. So now I'll go through some of the case studies that rose to the fore as providing really useful lessons. We've discussed Human Network International Service 321, which was presented in the Uganda workshop. They have a search engine, this is from their website, a search engine where there's no internet. They're relying on voice messages to distribute a wide range of information. And they've been astoundingly successful in Madagascar and Malawi, as mentioned earlier. No internet or data required. It's a free voice service, so very accessible from zero cost entail. 3 million subscribers to the service so far, and it's been accessed more than 50 million times. They clearly have a model that works. They have been backed by public funds. They've piggybacked on the Airtel network, and this 50 million indicates that they've certainly created a virtuous cycle of value and trust. Then there's Mercy Corps' AgriFin mobile program, where there are over 100,000 farmers involved in Zimbabwe, Uganda, and Indonesia. And it's SMS and voice services for a wide range of information, again, similar to the 321 human international networks. Mobile payments, loans, growing tips on farming, market prices, etc. This program found that villagers preferred face-to-face TV and radio, in other words, the traditional forms of communication compared with mobile phones, and that where mobile phones were used, there had to be really intense training on their usage. And so this program had a lot of the key ingredients of bundling, understanding their local context. They did a lot of research on that, virtuous cycles, public funds, and piggybacking on existing networks. Then there's the Eco-Farmer project in Zimbabwe that is a partnership with, again, AgriFin Mobile. So there's donor funding there, together with Econet, the mobile phone operator in Zimbabwe. And SMSs are supplied on a wide range of topics. Over 200,000 farmers in Zimbabwe have signed up for it. And notably, 60% of them have changed their farming behavior as a result of these SMSs. So fantastic success here as well. And then there's a weather index-based insurance product that Econet and AgriFin have developed. It relies on automatic weather stations on their mobile phone towers. And what I found interesting from a technological point of view is that they're using the cell phones towers to determine exactly where the farmers are located. So they sign up for the index insurance through their cell phones. The cell phone, when they sign up, they need to be standing in their field, I take it. And the cell phone company can detect where their field is and then work out what weather information applies to that particular farmer at the field scale. And more than 1,000 farmers have signed up last year. So Econet and Eco-Farmer are doing bundling. They've got virtuous cycles in place, trust, ease of value, ease of access and value for the end user. They're using public funds again, and they're piggybacking on Econet's infrastructure. Another highly successful model for crossing the last line is Kilimo Salama project in Kenya. They're working with big companies, Syngenta, Safaricom, and UAP Insurance. Again, it's donor stroke public funding or CSI investment here with the Syngenta Foundation. And they've created an index-based insurance that's reaching tens of thousands of people in Kenya. They're using the M-Pesa platform. Syngenta's network of stores, thousands of stores across Kenya, local trainers on how to use the insurance product and how to use the mobile phone apps. And the insurance comes with a seed purchase. We'll have the option to purchase it. So again, bundling virtuous cycles, because farmers have relationships with Safaricom already and Syngenta stores. They're piggybacking on an enormous infrastructure, and there's active engagement at the community level, as you can see in these photographs. So you see these themes are repeating over and over. Another wonderful project in Senegal in the Catherine region, a research project this time where 3 farmer communities were engaged, and over 2 years there, it was a social research project, providing SMSs in several languages on weather forecasts in particular. They worked intensely with the Red Cross, so that's where the existing infrastructure comes in. They trained the Red Cross staff in these villages to interact with the communities. And they found that messages posted on boards at communal meeting points like boreholes were the most successful way of transferring information across that last mile. Again, bundling virtuous cycles, using infrastructure, public funding. It was a donor-funded project, deep engagement and understanding of the local context. And they found that they had to change their way of messaging across the 2 years considerably in order to achieve more success. And that's why I highlight the iteration there. So another worthy of deep contemplation, just to pause in between these case studies. I would imagine that all of you would be surprised to realize that out of that Senegal study, that the way to communicate over the last mile changed over 10 kilometers. The one village wanted messages displayed in a mosque, another wanted it at boreholes, and there were more nuances, like one wanted radios, one wanted SMSs. So to think you can do blanket coverage across the country with 1 or 2 methods is naive. Ideally, you need to understand what's happening at 10-kilometer intervals to be fully successful. And then what they found with women and men, you know, we talk about gender comes up frequently, but to find really concrete examples of how to take gender into account, I always find very interesting. So the Senegal study found that women needed to plant later than the men. They planted different crops, millets and not maize. And that this was because the men owned the donkeys and the horses needed for plowing. And so the men got the first go at the planting season. And the men wanted to know when the rains are arriving. The women wanted to know when are the rains ending. That was what was important for them. Because they were needing to get their growing in before the end of the rainy season. So they wanted different information. Similarly, in Tanzania, another donor-funded project, they found that men wanted radio presenters trained. They wanted to listen to the radio in terms of receiving advice on when to plant, etc., whereas the women wanted to hear the information from the extension officers and the village leaders. Very nuanced, intricate understanding required to do this successfully. The company Orange, sorry, pressing the wrong button, in Mali has set up a mobile phone platform, again piggybacking on infrastructure and bundling services, etc. What I want to highlight here is that Orange ran into a lot of problems. They found that even a minor cost for SMSs and calls prevented the information being disseminated. That unless they undertook extensive marketing, their messages weren't getting through. That network coverage was a problem, even though they were the network, the mobile phone operator. And that, again, they missed the boat on what women required. They were providing information the men appeared to receive well, but the women wanted more detailed information on livestock, fisheries, agroforestry, and wild fruits, of all things. Again, highlighting the intricacies, complexity. Here's the one example where the private sector's actually run with it, taken the ball and moved without any public funding. And that's insurance companies in South Africa that found that when you get hailstones this size, you get a fair bit of damage to cars. I don't know if you can see the holes in that windscreen and the damage to the roof. When you got hailstones the size of cricket balls, there's a bit of damage involved, and the insurance companies are going to go out of their way to prevent making those payouts. So what they've found is that they can use their large customer database. They know where people are. They know what people own if they've got a fancy BMW. They don't want that hailstone going through the window. So they've tailored SMSs to reduce hail and fire damage, and they send the SMS to their customers saying, please take your car undercover, there's a hailstorm coming. And so it's solely a cost reduction driven thing, and all our themes don't apply, so there's always an exception. Social media hasn't, to our knowledge, really kicked off in a major way in Africa for discussing weather events and how to respond, but it's gaining a lot of traction in Australia and Europe and the US, where Twitter and Facebook, there's a social media community that gets very engaged in how to respond to an impending storm or weather event. So moving on to the last section of my talk, learning from other sectors. Coca-Cola in particular has some fantastic lessons for covering the last mile. You know, other sectors face the same problems as we're facing. There's a disproportionate cost in covering that last mile. It's much more costly than one anticipates, and often more costly than actually generating the data. The other sectors also find that they need trust. They need a lot of marketing to get their product sold and distributed to the end user in rural areas. They found that engagement with the local communities is essential.
You know, sharing with us all the experiences, all the challenges, all the possible solutions for the implementation of these innovative and we believe, very relevant projects in the entire portfolio of UNDP with respect to adaptation to climate change and innovative technologies, etc. So I am personally, we work hard in preparing this workshop to make it hands-on, to make it informal, to make it a place where everybody would have a chance to speak loud and be heard. And for me, as the manager of the CIRDA project, I'm very happy about it. I couldn't be happier actually, because I think that the results are there. We go back home with a lot of your inputs. We will start. We have a kind of a blank paper in which we will fill in the agenda and the experts and all the work to be done in Zambia based on your specific requests. We have a large team of experts finally that the Global Support Program managed to hire. I managed to hire for you, according to your request, exactly the kind of experts you asked me to do for you. And you met them, you liked them, and they're coming. There are going to be missions now, boots on the ground, people coming, sitting with you, working with you. So for me, I hope that all the initial requests that you made to the CIRDA program to support the 11 national projects is there, and it's a work in progress. So anything that doesn't work, we can change. Anything you want more, we can add. So I really invite you to keep this informal relationship with us and keep talking, keep the dialogue up, and again, be very blunt when you disagree, so that we can improve the results even better. So I can only tell you I'm extremely happy about this workshop, and the whole work. The workshop is just a small piece of the work we're doing together. And I really hope that we just build on what we have done, and we'll do much more in the months and years to come. So thank you so much, everybody. And I'll ask my colleague and friend from the country office of the beautiful hosting country to give some of his knowledge and enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate the workshop, and it is to my expectation. I didn't participate in the previous workshop. This is my first workshop to attend on this project. But I really obtained a lot of lessons from various national presentations, and also I learned a lot from the prominent experts here. I'm looking forward to follow with them. I discussed with some of them, and I think my mates, colleagues, the hydrology and meteorology also, I'll communicate them in my back office report to keep in touch with experts and with all of you. I will also share all the presentations that we have here. So personally, I learned a lot, even though Ethiopia thought that we have gone so far, but I realized from the workshop there is a lot of work is ahead of us. It is really a challenge that procuring equipment is one step, but the most important step is still waiting for us. I can see the various challenges, and we hope as we succeed in the procurement, we will also succeed in overcoming the challenges and make use of the equipment, as my colleague repeatedly say, to help the lost community level, the end users, to make use of the information that we generate. So it's an honor for me to say these few words, and I thank you very much and for the opportunity.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your participation. It's been a thoroughly stimulating 3 days. A closing request from me. Please do keep thinking about who we should be interviewing in the private sector over the next month or two, because if you can direct us to those conversations that are going to be most fruitful for the market study, the end product is going to be optimized for your use. And thank you very much for all the time, your generosity in providing lots of rich information to Olga and me over the last 3 days. Thanks. Look forward to meeting up in Lusaka or Livingston.
I think most of my comments have been already said. I'd just like to highlight that we still have a lot of work to do, that especially this idea of targeting the end users, but understanding what kind of products that they will need. So as we look forward, I think to Lusaka or Livingston or wherever we end up, I think it would be useful if we move towards that project upon leaving here. So let's not delay in sort of trying to get the market studies going at the local level, understanding the user needs, trying to look at what information we can bring together ahead of that workshop, because I think it will enable us at that workshop to actually use that information and make steps forward, which rather than coming at it, I guess, cold. So that would be my sort of first request. My second request is, I don't know if you all remember, but we sent out some emails about M&E quite a while ago, and we haven't had a chance to sort of discuss it here, but I will be sending out reminders, and some countries, such as Zambia and Uganda, have actually gone through this process. So I'll share with you some TORs. Please, can we, just a request, just make that a bit of a priority as well over the next month or so. And I will try and help you get through that as well. So, yeah, thanks.
So my closing remark would also just be to, first of all, reiterate how much we've learned from having the one-on-one conversations. There's no substitute for those direct interactions. And as Bonnie said, for those of us who are limited in our ability to come all this way, particularly John, Jeremy, and myself from the United States, Bonnie actually as well. We are so delighted now to have our colleagues to interact with and beef up our resources in terms of communication. And we really expect that as a consequence, our interactions will benefit as much as yours. So we really are looking toward our new 5 colleagues who were introduced to you the first day in having much more frequent direct interactions. And then very briefly, just on the business side, even today, those of you with whom I interacted heard really some new thoughts as to what we need to do next. So we've talked a lot about the value and importance of market studies. We have the example that Uganda did. Joost, who did that study, is now part of our team, and so can help in terms of those countries who are just going to be doing the TORs for those. But it had not, at least for me, been so apparent that for many of the Met agencies, you will need help in the staffing capacity area to be able to incorporate this function in your in your business plans. That this is something we will need to work with our UNDP colleagues in the work plans for next year as part of the next steps in making it really realistic for you to have that in-house knowledge and staff capacity so that you can effectively use this new data, use this technical improvement, but be able to take it out and communicate it and engage with the business parties that hopefully the market study is going to help tell you you should be engaging. So this is something that came through a number of the meetings this afternoon, those of you who I spoke with, and thank you very much for helping inform us as well in making what we do hopefully more effective, valuable, and ultimately contribute to sustainable development.
I don't know if Bonnie saved the best for last, or I just want to echo a number of comments been made. First of all, this was our first effort at what I would think of as a small meeting. For those of you who have attended our other sessions, we've had 70 to 90 people, so 2 to 3 times as many folks as we have here. But I think this has been a much better size audience for interaction. As Alan has just indicated, the opportunity in the one-on-one meetings has both been, I hope, helpful to you. They've certainly been insightful to me and have given me some ideas of what I need to do next. So we're going to become here, I think, shortly as you get your procurements underway. We're going to be transitioning to turning data into information. I think we've got a good idea of how we're going to collect our data in the years to come. Now we need to talk about how to take that data and to turn it into useful information, useful to a wide and diverse audience. Big challenges in doing that. But that's also the exciting part. There's those of us who like to collect data just for the sake of collecting data. But the real payoff comes when we turn it into useful products for people that range from school children to the security forces to the subsistence farmer to the fisherman out off Sao Tome. All are important people to us and to others, and we can make a real difference with those. So I want to thank all. I was the nominal planner for this. This was a real collective effort, but this has turned out to be a wonderful session with a lot of useful exchange among yourselves as well. And that was a big part of what we tried to accomplish, and I feel pretty good about it. So thank you.
And even most importantly, without Roxana Menea and Anand Saviai, this couldn't happen. So I would say the applause goes to